Let me do this.
The webinar will start shortly. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. We know that there are a few more individuals that are joining this webinar. Thank all of you for joining the YWCA for our Stand Against Injustice Lunch and Learn with our topic today that is so important, supporting and protecting the LGBTQ plus community. It goes without saying that we work to develop allies for our communities that are disparately impacted by negative activities. I wanted to start with the YWCA mission, and this is the reason we do these lunch and learns. Our mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. I had the fortunate experience of being tutored by a phenomenal woman, my late mother, Lady Kendall. And the one thing she emphasized to her children is that we should never mistreat another individual. She felt very strongly that there was dignity, there was light in each individual, and I was brought up like this. But I'm going to tell you a little bit of self-reflection that I had that really I think is important for all of us to think about. I grew up during the civil rights movement. In 5th grade, I had the experience of being the only Black child in a classroom of a newly integrated school. That teacher never called upon me in that whole year. I was mistreated. She called Black children Negroes, and I guess that's a hybrid of Negro and nigger. I'm gonna say it is, it's Negro. You've heard the term Negro, and that's what in the South was a very pejorative term. I withstood that and built resilience because I had the resilience of a community of people that helped me. It goes without saying, my parents were strong. They were strong in their faith. They were strong, and I was absolutely right. She was absolutely wrong. There was a level of lack of power that they had in that situation because the laws and the community, the broader white community, supported her in her negative actions. I also had a church family that really taught you that civil rights, you are a good person, you are a perfect person, God is shining on you and God will sustain you. The reason I'm telling you this story is because for a long time, there was a certain community standard of Black people have gone through more than gay people because gay people can be in the closet, or gay people can hide their sexuality, or gay people are just different. However, I started thinking about this in terms of what if I had gone through the experience I had with parents that thought I was bad, with friends that thought what I was doing was not normal, that the church even turned its back on me despite wanting to love God and wanting to have faith. That would have been a debilitating, horrible experience. So I want us to understand today in this conversation that we have children in our community now that are facing that very negative impact. Unless we work hard as a community to build that resilience for these children, they will be lost to us. So what I'm asking for those who are on this website and those that can, let's make sure that we provide the resilience to especially the children in our community that are struggling through this issue. Because if we don't, then they will not have the resilience. They cannot sit here on a webinar as I am today, knowing that I've gone through a lot, gone through a hellish situation and come out the other end positively. So that was a bit of self-reflection that I always like to set the tone with. I want to say I'm very excited about this panel, and it looks as though our community is too. Very quickly, as we know, the LGBTQ plus community has been under attack. It's been under attack from all fronts. We've had legislation, we've had the US Supreme Court, even though they've legalized same-sex marriage, it's a very tenuous situation. We've had legislators who have come out with what the late John Lewis said is hate speech. They've come up with hateful things really to attack a community. There have been physical threats and violence against the community. We really have to, there've also been internal within the community threats against each other. So that I think it's very important for us to understand, although there's been some progress, that there are still so many things that are threatening. And taking it to that personal level, we are now having our children threatened. And we cannot do that. We cannot have that as a community if we want to be the best of ourselves. And so I'm going to start now. First of all, thank Nissan Foundation for making this webinar possible and this conversation, because that is what we are doing. So let's get started. I want to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and to let us know what part of this equation they fit into as far as the community. I'll start with our board member, Abby Rubenfeld. You're muted, Abby.
My bad. Thank you, Sharon. I too went to segregated schools until I was in high school. I grew up in Florida. I'm an attorney in private practice here in Nashville. I'm a solo practitioner. I do primarily family law and civil rights. I was honored to be one of the attorneys that went to the Supreme Court for marriage equality. One of the 4 cases with Rubenfeld was our case from Tennessee, Tanko v. Haslam. And I've been working on LGBT rights since I started practicing law in 1979. And I'm a mom. I have 2 daughters and a stepdaughter and a daughter-in-law. And I'm going to soon have a son-in-law. That's me.
All right, let's go to Phil.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Phil Cobucci. I use he and they pronouns. I am the founder and board president of Inclusion Tennessee. We are a relatively new nonprofit here in the Nashville and Middle Tennessee area, focused on building spaces of belonging for LGBTQ people throughout the mid-state.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Dwayne Jenkins.
Hey, thank you, everyone. I'm Dwayne. I am the founder and president or CEO of Brothers United Network, which actually hosts our annual Nashville Black Pride celebration that will be in its 21st year in October. I'm also the director of MSM programming at Nashville Cares, which is Tennessee's leading HIV/AIDS service organization. And glad to be here.
All right, we'll start back with you, Dwayne.
Oh,
We know that attitudes, because there are several subsets of this. I always say that, racism and sexism and homophobia, all these things fit together.
correct.
And some attitudes change or evolve, but some of them stay the same. Tell me something about some of the attitudes that you feel have changed in various segments of the community, and what do you see happening today?
There's been a great evolution, and I guess majority of it could be because of social media. When I first got here in '94, we still had access to the internet around 95, 96, but it wasn't as big as it is today. And so I think with the inclusion of different shows, different films, as well as books and events that the local organizations have been able to hold. I think it's been a great evolution over time. One of the things that I think was really, really helpful in the beginning was that people, I guess back then, were really very trustful within the LGBT community. And so as someone who was trying to reach out, back then we didn't have, we just started the email server type thing, but I actually had home addresses, maybe a couple of PO boxes, but actually had home addresses because people wanted to be involved. They wanted to be updated on events and activities. And that has changed over the years because now we have email addresses and social media pages. But watching that evolution from the time that I started back in '94 has been a great thing. Great thing.
All right, okay, Phil. Same question, about the evolution of attitudes and things, and what do you see happening today?
Well, I think it's an interesting world that we're in right now, right? Because as attitudes have changed dramatically, I think ever since, as Abby was talking just a few moments ago in her introduction about Obergefell, I think ever since marriage equality, we've seen sort of this increase of these rounds of horrible legislation that continue to attack and diminish our community and try to tear our community apart in a multitude of different ways, right? And while we've had legislation that has continued to rip apart our community prior to that, I think now that marriage equality has passed, we've seen specifically legislation that targets the transgender community. We see legislation that's targeting art and drag performance, as an example. We see legislation that is targeting so much more within our community, trying to split folks apart and kind of create these divisions within the community. And so with that also comes the sense of safety, and that safety is kind of ripped apart from the fabric that lives within our community, right? So there are people who feel safe and feel fine, but then there's extended division within our own community as well, specifically when you talk about race and different genders within our community. You can talk about the lived experience of a BIPOC member of our community is completely different from someone who might be white and cisgender, right? Whereas someone who is trans and Black has a completely different lived experience in our community. And I think because we have legislation and we have different lived experiences that kind of try to separate us, it causes division even within our community. And so there's this fray that's happening. And what we need to be doing as community members within our own community is finding ways to come back together so that we can fight for one another, so that we can move ahead in sort of a unison in one format, so that we can fight for one another. Because at the end of the day, one queer person, one LGBTQIA plus person should be standing up for another person, no matter how you identify.
Yeah, most definitely. And Abby, and also touch on some of the evolution, because we have seen the evolution in the marriage equality and the litigation. But let's see about some of the other evolution from the more of the positives and negatives that go along with that.
Well, I agree with both of my co-panelists, and I would add to what Dwayne said about social media that I think even basic TV and cable has made a huge difference. Having shows like Queer Eye for the straight guy, and even like Will and Grace back in the day, and then the more, like RuPaul's Drag Race. I mean, there's so many shows now, and we're characters in so many shows. Except if we're Asian, they're still doing bad about Asians on TV. I just gotta say, they're getting better on other groups, but they're forgetting them. But I think that kind of TV acceptance, movie acceptance, people watch that in popular media. I think that really helps us. And I've also seen a huge difference in our courts, which is kind of my frame of reference. When I first started practicing law in the late 70s, I once had somebody sitting as a judge tell me that he hated all gay people and thought they should all be lined up and shot. Somebody sitting as a judge said that to me, a gay person. But fast forward, and now like courts are used to gay couples. There, before we won marriage equality, Judge Smith, the late Judge Smith, who did all the divorces or does half the divorces in Davidson County, he called me and said, Abby, I think you're going to win. What do I need to do to be prepared? I mean, it's like the legal world has changed, and not just in Nashville. I mean, we've elected better judges, I think, all over the state. I mean, we still have way, far to go, but we're starting to have more people that understand. I mean, it would be better if somebody else was appointing judges currently, but we'll get there. People need to register to vote and get out and vote so that things can change. And should I wait? I'll wait and talk about Obergefell when that's the topic, okay? Or do you want me to talk about that now?
You can go ahead and start.
Okay, well, I just want to say that the Obergefell case, we all would have been way happier if our team had filed our petition to the Supreme Court a few minutes earlier, because then the case would have been called Tanko v. Haslam, and everyone can say those words. There's no Obergefell, people say all different ways. But that case was a huge milestone. It was just a major civil rights victory. When I started practicing law in 1979, or even throughout the 80s or 90s, if you had told me we would have marriage equality in my lifetime, I would have said you were crazy. I never thought this would happen in our lifetimes. But that just shows you how things have been changing so rapidly, and also shows that legal changes sometimes happen because the community wants that, even if our so-called leaders or the people in our groups aren't ready to take it on. Like, the people in the community want that to happen, and that is certainly how marriage equality was. And I think it's great that we have marriage equality. It's great. And as Sharon said, it's not absolutely protected. I mean, our current Supreme Court is an activist, right-wing, religiously focused court, and overturning Roe v. Wade is a very bad sign for marriage equality and other individual rights, because one of the first things you learn in law school is this concept of stare decisis, that when cases are decided, they're the law of the land and you can depend on them. And that's what we all thought about Roe v. Wade. But overturning that, you can't go back and undo abortions and stuff. If they were to try to overturn Obergefell, it would create such problems in this country for people like me who have been married for a number of years, who filed their taxes, as a married couple. Like, are we all going to have to go back and redo them? I mean, we just, and before marriage equality, it was the system, which it still is, about marijuana, but that's a separate subject, where every state has different rules, and you go to one place and you're legal, in another place you're not. Like, one of our couples in our marriage equality case from Tennessee was a military couple, and they were transferred. Guy was an Afghanistan vet, and he was transferred. He and his husband were transferred to Memphis. So when they were on the base, they were married. But if they put, one toe over into Memphis, they weren't married anymore. And that's ridiculous. And we just can't go back to that, even though Clarence Thomas has said he wants us to. Personally, I do not think there are enough votes. I don't think that they'll do that, but you never know with this group. We just cannot be vigilant enough to protect our rights. And this new legislation, do you want me to talk about that, Sharon?
Well, we'll wait just a minute for that, because it really lets you understand how things work, because we've been through this. We've seen this play before. Brown v. Board of Education was a landmark Supreme Court case. Supreme Court says, no, the schools need to be integrated. And literally, if you attend any civil rights museum, you will see decades later, schools were not integrated. And so even though this is a Supreme Court law that says that, you have the right to marriage equality, there are laws and changes that can happen at a state level, because that does not change the attitudes of people, and people will find very creative ways to really break that down and make it difficult. And we're seeing some of those things happen now. And so I think it's very important for us to learn the lessons from the civil rights movement. And if anyone, this is what I always tell people, if you ever have the opportunity, read what ministers were saying to Dr. Martin Luther King when he was in the Birmingham jail. Everyone needs to understand, this was not an easy task. There were people within his own community, within his own religious order that were working against him. So we always have to be very vigilant. Let me go to you, Phil. Let's talk a little bit about hate speech and the impact that has on the community.
I think hate speech is something that it's unfortunate that we see from our elected officials all the way down to what we're seeing in some of our city streets, unfortunately, here in around the state, outside of a drag show, for example, right? I think when we're looking at legislation, this legislation against drag shows, I think the first thing that we have to realize is that people who are writing this legislation are probably looking at one or two videos of a drag performance that who have never been to a drag show to begin with, right? And they just see one set of the extreme, and they don't know to what extent drag really is. They don't know that it's an art form. They don't know the history of drag. They don't know that it's, so on and so forth. And what this does is it opens up an opportunity for people to really scream their hate, right, in a very public format. That's one extreme, right? You're also seeing it when we have this anti-LGBT legislation, because it's going specifically towards trans youth, specifically to LGBT youth. You imagine being a young person here in Tennessee, and you hear that your legislators are saying you can't use a bathroom, or you can't get access to healthcare, right? Or it's giving a teacher, it's telling a teacher that they can no longer use your proper pronouns. That's hate speech, right? Imagine being misgendered, just walking into a school, and the teacher is now required to call you by the pronouns that you were, or by the gender marker that you were born with, right? That could be considered hate speech. Unfortunately, I was at an event 2 years ago down in Murfreesboro, and a teacher announced a student's name using their, what we would call in trans issues, their dead name, which is their name prior to transition. And they did it completely by accident, but they announced that name publicly, and it caused that student such emotional distress and harm that student ran out of the entire auditorium crying vocally and loudly. But you can imagine what that kind of stuff does to youth, right? Those are just some of the ways that I would interpret hate, right? You also have what's happening from behind a computer screen. People are brave behind a computer screen. So, never read the comments. But I mean, there is some really awful stuff. We were talking, prior to the start of our webinar about the newspaper and some of the things that people believe in some of these news articles, right? We were just talking the comments that people leave in some of these news articles. I see some friends in the audience here, and I know that they will fight on our behalf. I see Kathy Holbrooks as one of our longtime allies in the community, which I see her name quite a bit popping up in our, fighting for our community. And the hate that these people are spewing because they're brave behind a computer screen, but they'll never say it to our face because they don't have that kind of courage. There's a lot that happens when people are behind a keyboard.
Oh, most definitely. And we'll go to you, Dwayne, because, I really want you to not only talk about hate speech, but I want to talk to you to talk a little bit about how these issues of race and sexuality, how you get mixed, because will be the first to acknowledge that there are members of our community that need a lot of work. There are members in our church that need a lot of work, because people really have to look at the history of the civil rights struggle and look at how you felt and how you were treated. And how in the world a person of color would ever treat another person in the way that was viewed as so harmful. And like I said, we did have a lot of positivity that gave us a lot of resilience that a lot of the people, our kids especially today, do not have. Some of the things, Phil, you said are heartbreaking, because even though I was misnamed and mistreated, of course, I was called other words. I had people in my community that embraced me and loved me and gave me strength and made me understand that those people were absolutely wrong. So we'll go to you, Dwayne.
I think when you're talking about hate speech, it's unfortunate because as the other panelists mentioned, it can come from everywhere. And so for those, let's say, that it comes from the home, it can start immediately from the home, whether it be a commercial, whether it be one of the shows that we were referencing that may have an LGBTQ character, or they just wearing something a little bit different, a little bit trendy that makes them look different. You know, anything that's different is what makes it sad. And regardless if it's from African-American and other Black and brown communities, I think it starts within the home, and that's where it sort of leads into other things. So individuals who may be queer or of the LGBTQ experience, they immediately are used to it. And then from there, if they're going, you know, if they're not homeschooled, they're going to school, they may hear it there, you know, and I know it's been a while since the whole thing, don't say gay and all of that. So that has happened too when you're growing up, and that's the first thing people will say to try and get under your skin. And depending on where you're from, I'm from New York, I'm from the Bronx, so different things were said differently. But you know, if you also go from there and then going, let's say if you're a church going person and you're going there, and then all of a sudden you get the same thing at the church, you have nowhere to turn. You know, because if you're not comfortable yet sharing your experience with a close friend or relative, then you are literally just by yourself and trying to hold it all in and go, I can't talk to anybody about what I may be experiencing. Or even if, and the bad thing about it is, even if you are cisgendered and straight heterosexual, you still can't talk against it because it's that fear, because you've heard it. And you don't want that association by you saying, I don't think there's a problem with it. Oh, so you must be that person too. So then you get our allies not wanting to stand up because they don't want to get the ridicule of all of that as well. And of course, as Phil mentioned, all of the other stuff on the back end of how we, you know, hear things about what is said about us and what is, you know, done. Sometimes you want it up front, especially if there's no harm or physical harm coming to a person. You'd rather know, okay, this is a friend or foe. But most of the time, as we are going on now, you can't tell. They will smile, honey. They will give you food. They will do anything. And then the next minute, as soon as you go, they will like vote no on something or do something else and be like, ah. And then that's very confusing, because you would think, hey, you know me, you may know my spouse, you may know other people in the community. We all have different voices, but be open to hear these voices so that you can help us cut down on the hate speech.
And I've always believed that it's hard to hate close up. And that's where people get into, like you're saying, Dwayne, people seem okay, but they really are not in the long haul because they're afraid of being associated with certain people. But you know, this is the same thing that happened with the civil rights movement. I tell you, don't learn that lesson. But
exactly.
I've always felt is that legislation and legislators are a reflection of what the community allows them to be. People get some sort of support or some sort of political advantage from taking certain steps, and that happens no matter what the legislation is. I'm going to start again. I'll start with you, Abby. Why do you believe that elected officials feel so empowered to take negative action specifically against the trans community? Because I think that the trans community is being attacked more specifically than the greater LGBTQ plus community.
Well, that's a really good point, Sharon. And I think that's just a continuation of right-wing tactics that have been going on, my whole life or the whole time I've been, you can go back to Governor Wallace and the people who were anti-civil rights, and it was all the same kind of attitudes. I just totally lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm old. Would you say the question again? Sorry
No,
about
we're
that.
just looking at why do you feel like they were in power? For instance, Governor Wallace made speeches about race, and he felt invincible because he felt as though the community supported him. Now,
And they
here we
did.
are years later, and he looked like he was an absolute fool for taking those positions to some. But why is it that the trans community seems to be singled out?
But it's always been, I think, using wedge issues for political reasons to get out the vote. It's no coincidence that these attacks become greater during election years. Here we are going into 24. It's an election cycle. These bills get out right-wing voters, and that's what they want to do. In the trans community, I think right-wing people assume they're powerless. They're not going to be able to fight back. They're going to pull in more people, not just the fringes, but more people closer to the middle, because trans people aren't always understood. We need to do a lot more education about what's going on with that community, and back to the basics of people are people. And, but I think that that's been happening for a long time to different groups. And trans people, especially trans kids, I mean, they're the most vulnerable of all, and that's who a lot of this legislation targets. And I think also the hate speech that we were talking about leads to that, or enforces that, makes people feel like they can say those kinds of things. And hate speech nowadays, since Trump, I think, has been escalating, so that it's not just speech, it's encouraging violence, and is in fact causing violence to the trans community and to other people in our community. And can I also point out that, just as an aside, that we're using the word queer some, which is a catch-all phrase for LGBTQ plus and all the other letters. But some of us older gay people don't. That was a pretty pejorative term.
Yeah, I'm with
called.
you, Abby. I'm with you, Abby.
And I'm trying to learn.
yeah.
I'm trying to learn, because it is a better, it's an umbrella term, and my daughter uses it. But in case other people who are old like me don't really know that, I just wanted to point that out, that it's an accepted term now.
Yes, it was what you called someone to insult them who was
Right.
gay. And typically men did it to other men.
Right.
That was, that was the locker room term that was used. So it is sort of things have turned around, and hopefully we'll give each other enough grace to have an understanding that people may not appreciate terminology, but we don't want to invent the dictionary. We want to give people dignity and respect. Okay.
So I would like to add one thing to that, and Abby, I really appreciate you saying that, and Sharon, thank you for the follow-up. I think with that word, the movement within some of the younger people in the community is that we want to take power back from some of the words that have been used to diminish and degrade people in our community. And so queer was a word that was used to, just as the word tranny has also been used to diminish and hurt people, right? And now there are people who are actually taking those words back and saying, okay, I am this, and I'm proud of that. And so by no means am I saying go ahead and start using those words today. Like, please don't, unless you are like in the community and you are comfortable with it, and you are actively engaged, and the people you are talking to. Like, I am not going to go out there on the stage and start screaming at even myself in a role of leadership. But just be mindful of it. So.
All right, Dwayne, why do you feel that elected officials feel empowered to attack the queer community? See, I've learned I'm trying to evolve the queer community, and specifically the trans community.
It's as we're leading into this conversation, it's also different for African American and other Black and Browns, because a majority of people still use same gender loving because they wanted to take the harshness off of gay. It's like, I'm not gay, I'm same gender loving, to bring an expression of what was going on, or SGL, as the acronym. So, but we're always going to have different things of trying to define or redefine words and all of that. And it's very, very difficult for those of us who are of a certain age to hear them and then go, oh, I don't understand how you can reclaim a word. But one of the great things is that as we are trying to build up support, we also have to do that within our own things. And I can remember way back in the day, Abby and I were on a different panel at a university or something, and someone's pronoun was messed up because we weren't really getting into pronouns. And this person was just so upset. We were like, we didn't know, we didn't, have some grace for us because we didn't, you're presenting in a different way. So we're sorry, we apologize. And again, that happened like live, like on the stage where we were just like, sorry, we didn't know. We didn't, we need, a little grace with that. And so as we go through these terms, we have to remember that. But I do think when talking about political things, most of them, the assumption is they're doing it for their, what do they call their, Lord, I'm not political. They're people that they're, what do you call them?
Constituents?
There you go, that 25-cent word, that one right there, constituent. They're doing it for their constituent. That's all you hear. They're doing that. And so when you, let's say if it's in a specific area, if you're, if you're voting, let's say you're in East Nashville or something like that, and whether you see something different when you're looking at the voter signs and all of that other stuff, that person, you're like, your constituents are all in favor of, let's say, LGBTQ rights. But you are saying that you're speaking for them, and it is very clear that you are not. And I think, as Abby mentioned, with the different presidencies and the way different things were held, people just assume that they can say anything and everything. And if they don't hear a lot of individuals saying anything against it, they're going to continue to do it until someone slaps their hand. And unfortunately, the hands aren't being slapped by enough people. So that they're getting their chests are getting boasted up. Like, oh, I can do this. Let me see if I can get away with this. Oh, got away with this. Oh, got away with that. And that's one of the other reasons why it's really important as communities that we know, and I don't know the quote, but that old quote of, they came for me, they came for this person, I didn't do anything. And somewhere down the road, they're coming for us all. And so if we don't understand that certain things, we don't have to worry about, marriage equality. We don't have to worry about young trans rights or anything like that. And then as things go, then all of a sudden you go, oh, that's my auntie, that's my uncle, that's my cousin, or that's my best friend. And then you're like, oh, I should have voted. Oh, should have helped. And it's too late, because by the time they start on something else that you don't think is we are all intertwined. The spider web's going out to every little thing. And so I think that's going to be the most important thing politically for those who aren't political, because a lot of people don't want anything to do with politics because they see it, they don't think it works. They think that, we're always going to be taken advantage of, and that keeps people away. And we have to always sort of bring them back in and go, please, 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 please. Right now, it may have these letters on it, but sooner or later, it's going to get back to this. So please, if we need your support, we will support you in something else as you support us in this particular, issue.
Yeah, I agree. And what you're looking for is a quote that really stems from the Holocaust, where the people were saying, oh, it's not a big deal. They're just coming for these people. They aren't that important. And then next thing you know, you on a train going to a concentration camp. So you have to really get ahead of these things, because I've always thought that I cannot imagine someone being so adamant about being anti-LGBTQ plus and being someone that is not racist. I think they go very hand in hand. I think if your mind could ever go there to hate another person like that, then you're gonna come and hate me too. So I say, so I just think you need to protect the rights of others, because, that is just the thing to do, because it ensures dignity for all. Let's get into healthcare. Healthcare has been an issue forever for all different communities. I think it must be chapter 1 of any discriminatory workbook. Let's get let's attack their healthcare. Let's attack their right to healthcare, whether it's women, Black people, brown people, and trans people, whatever. Let's get into this issue because there are several different aspects of this. One is the experience that a trans person specifically, or even a gay person may have in trying to access the healthcare system. I'll start with you, Dwayne, and specifically the care for trans youth.
And there I go. Sorry about that. So when I'm flipping my other hat, going from Black Pride to the Nashville Cares hat, the wonderful thing as an agency, providing services for over 30 years in a variety of different aspects, whether it be case management and doing that for people at risk for HIV or living with HIV or at risk for HIV, including prevention education, case management, housing and nutrition. Those things were always very important for individuals. And now that we have our Nashville Cares My House Clinic, one of the things we had to make sure is that it broadened out our scope to include the entire, let's say, alphabet, the LGBTQ spectrum. And so providing trans health and doing all of that is very important to us because, again, a healthy community can only better serve all of us in whatever capacity. We want people to be healthy. We want them to be wealthy and well, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so it's very important as an agency that we provide these services with respect and dignity for all. So, that's one of the primary things as an agency that we want to make sure we continue to do. And depending on who actually comes in for trans health specifically, that's what we want to make sure that they're able to see themselves when they come in the door, able to be safe and able to be affirmed and to get the care that they need.
All right, I'll go to you, Phil, and keeping in mind that the YW is the largest provider of domestic violence services in the state. And one thing we always keep in mind, although the physical aspects of domestic violence, most people are looking at that and wanting to stop that. But there is the emotional and there are emotional and psychological aspects to domestic violence that people often overlook or don't address. And Phil, I want you to really get into some of those things because that to me is the essence of making sure we build resilience, especially in our trans children and our gay children.
You're specifically referring to the emotional and mental well-being outside of domestic situations, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And so without a doubt, there is so many challenges that happen with our LGBT youth in general. I mean, obviously, with the experiences that they are having now in just being raised, I think the last stat that I read was that 78% of LGBTQ Southerners LGBTQ Southerners under the age of 30 do not feel safe, either in their home or in their school or in a place of work. One of the three, right? There's a lack of safety. And so with coming with a lack of safety also comes a lack of the need for mental care in some capacity, right? They do not have the ability to flourish. They don't have the ability to thrive in some way, shape, or form. And so that is part of the work that we do. We're hoping to build on at Inclusion Tennessee, right? We understand that everybody needs really strong mental health care. That is a really critical piece to the entire puzzle. And mental health care is not just the idea of being able to see a therapist, but it's also the ability to engage in, maybe a Western healing practice or just being social with a group of friends in a safe environment that's not a bar. It's other opportunities that are just being together with one another, where you have the opportunity to just engage socially, where you can create community, because within community you're able to thrive, you're able to grow. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about what Dwayne has done with his team down at my house, and that work down there. It's a very similar idea, is that there is a place with the My House Clinic down in Antioch that does a very similar work for same gender loving men of color, and creates a space for them to be. It's the same idea. Our community needs that. Our community needs places that they can be, period, where they can be safe, where they can be heard, where they can be loved, where they can exist. And that entire component of our lived experience is really part of that entire, like, Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? When we think about it, it is, we can tear apart Maslow's hierarchy of need all we want, because there's a lot of fault in that. But the reality is that we have to look at how many different pieces of that puzzle go back to our mental health care, our ability to feel safe, our ability to just feel loved and feel like we belong. And those are all really critical pieces to our existence as members of a thriving community.
Okay, I have a pretty hard and personal question. I'm gonna start with Abby because she's pretty tough, so I know she can take it. All of you, I know, have had your journey and challenges on these issues, but obviously something has given you a level of resilience. And I've always learned from people around me, how did you become who you are and become more comfortable? I didn't say comfortable, I said more comfortable in who you are. Abby, because this is going to help people who are listening.
Well, like you, Sharon, I grew up with really supportive parents. We moved from upstate New York to Florida when I was 7. And if anybody tells you Florida's not part of the South, don't believe them. I learned in school it was the breadbasket of the Confederacy. And it had just as much bias as any other place. But so learning from my parents that we treat everybody the same. I went to segregated schools until 1968. They must have sent the Brown decision by Pony Express or something to Sarasota. But when they finally did integrate our schools, and probably the same for you, wherever you were, they did it kind of backwards and started with the high schools. So the Black kids had been at these horrible schools with horrible resources. And then they brought them over to our schools. It wasn't fair to them. Nobody was prepared. We had race riots at our schools. We had police in the halls. And all of that, to me, that was just the first step. Once you start realizing that and seeing in action, fighting racism and the civil rights movement, it was just a natural extension to me about anti-Semitism, about anti-gay violence and anti-gay treatment. But interestingly, I guess, for me, I had a lot of trouble accepting who I was, but it was for a stupid reason. It was because of politics. I thought I wanted to go into politics. And in the 70s, if I was going to be a lesbian, there's no way I could run for Congress or be president. But then at some point I realized, like, what am I thinking? I don't want to go into politics. I'm miserable. And who would want to serve with those people? What if I got elected? And so then I started more accepting myself and immediately felt better about myself. And but there's the percentage of people who can be out nowadays as gay or lesbian or trans or non-binary or whatever has certainly increased dramatically since I was young, but it's still not safe for a lot of people. It's not safe with their families. We have no protection from job discrimination. You can be fired here in Tennessee because somebody thinks you're gay. It doesn't even matter if you really are. If they think you are, you can be fired. And in a lot of jobs, you have no recourse. So there are a lot of reasons that people still feel like they have to be closeted. And one of the things that we can show all of us is, there's support out there for people, and you can do it in baby steps, but the more people can come out, the more things change. Because as I think Dwayne said, somebody finds out that their sister or their cousin or their neighbor or their teacher is gay or is trans, and then it becomes real. Or maybe you said it, Sharon, but it becomes real. And we all need to try to do that to the extent we can, recognizing that there are legitimate reasons some people still fear to come out.
Okay, Phil, same question.
Wow. Okay. So this is gonna be a hard one for me, Sharon, because I'm not in Tennessee presently. I'm in New Jersey right now. My grandmother passed away, and so I'm actually here with my family. And I'm taking a moment away and I'm compartmentalizing, but I'll just tell you a little bit of my story. And since you asked, I moved to, I was born and raised in a very conservative family in northern New Jersey and New York City. And so I'm around a lot of my family right now, which also brings up a lot of this emotion,
Yes,
right?
good time.
And good times, right? And very conservative, evangelical family. I came out when I was 13 years old, and I obviously did not have a lot of support within my family structure for that. I was sexually assaulted within the church structure when I was a teenager, and then came out yet again a couple of years after that when I was 18 years old. And when I was 18, my parents sent me to conversion therapy, where I was sent to a year-long conversion therapy Bible boot camp, essentially for 9 months. I left there with the threat of never seeing my parents again, and saying, either you can see me again, or I'm going to come home. And so the option was, I came home. I went to Liberty University, Jerry Falwell School, which also has a very conservative bent to it. So I had to go, continue to stay back in the closet. The conservative structure of my life didn't really go away, and came out continually until I moved to Nashville, where I have kind of stayed separate from my parents since then. I started my business and kind of ran that while I was in Nashville. And I ran a business, and that's kind of how I kind of got involved in nonprofit work. I said, okay, well, I have this business that's running, and I'm going to just do my thing, and be all good. And in 2020, we all had really horrible years because of COVID and the pandemic. But mine started with losing my business prior to, from some employees that were a little dishonest, and then the tornado. And so I lost my house in the tornado and my business on the same day. And it kind of gave me this realization that I needed to do something different with my life after a lot of therapy. And this is a very short and abbreviated version of my story, obviously, but I took an opportunity to take a reset. And in 2021, it took a lot of the research and work that I had done as a volunteer of the community, and said, okay, we need to address some of the needs that exist here in Nashville. And I'm going to work with some folks, and we're going to build a brand new organization. And what I found was that I have all of these, sort of really negative lived experiences between conversion therapy and growing up in the church, and a lot of hurt and pain around being an out member of the community, and sexual assault and what have you. Said there are so many people in our community who have gone through the same things.
Yes.
But I need to be able to be a light and say, you can come through it, right? You can come through the pain. You can come through this. There's light on the other end. Do not give up. Continue to fight, because we are, we can make it through together. And so that's why I've kind of taken this entire opportunity the last, I'll be 40 in June. And I'm saying, you know what, let's chart a new path together as a community, and I'm going to help us walk through that path together, hopefully. So,
Wow, Phil. My
sorry.
heart goes out to you, but I will say this. We are having this conversation not for this Phil. We're having a conversation for the little Phils that are still coming through this. What I
Yep.
don't want to happen is that any person to have to go through what you've gone through, and I applaud you for stepping into that difficult space to help others, because that is why we are here. I cannot say enough about, listen to what he said. If you see someone that is suffering in this way, it is important that we as a community step into this space to stop this, And we have to even help other families and guide them through this whole process. Talk to these people, talk to their families, talk to them about how they should not be mistreating their loved ones, because that family dynamic is real, and it gets real difficult because there's still love there, but yet they don't understand you. And I say that, to me, was the defining moment for me to understand how it can be more difficult, because I had the loving wrapped around, family loves you, care for you, etc. I couldn't imagine going through it otherwise. So I thank you so much. Thank you. Dwayne, we have a few more minutes. You can go through this process. And I will say this, is that I think it's important to hear people's lived experiences, and that can help you often more than us responding to Q&A. So we'll go through this process. If someone has some additional questions, there are organizations you're hearing about on this call that you can contact or even contribute to their continued success. So we'll go with you, Dwayne.
Thank you. And thanks, Phil, for sharing your story. I've heard it, of course, and we've talked personally. So thank you again for sharing that. I know it can be difficult, especially where you are. So condolences again for your loss. It's so strange. We were talking earlier when we first started on how regional and how things can be really different. So he's in New Jersey going through all of this, even though I'm 16 or something years a senior, whatever. But I'm in New York, growing up in the Bronx. So I think my lived experience was really different because it was a really huge melting pot of individuals, Black, brown, I mean, it was everything. And so being an only child, I just had different experiences of having a large family, having great cousins and all the other things. And the real issues were small issues that came out later on. So I'm a diehard, love me some Donna Summer, and loved her since 74. And so that was more of an issue of, like, why you like her? What's going on? It's go. So again, although it could be geared toward, gay or same gender loving stuff, I didn't know it back then. I was like, I could care less. I got my little, money. I'm going to buy this album. So it was a little different. So the different things that were going on where I was, there could have been that tit for tat as kids do, but I'm so silly and stupid and goofy that a lot of times if people would say something, I would twist it because it was the truth. So if y'all remember back in the day, people used to get into fights and arguments, at least in the Bronx. They would say, your mama wears combat boots.
Oh, yeah.
And she did. So I was like, yeah, those brown ones with the little tassel or whatever. So I didn't get the joke. And they were just like, man, we can't even mess with you. Cause I'm just like, she does. What about it? What's the big deal? So the lived experience was different, even if I was just a borough away from where Phil was. And then just growing up, I probably officially came out in my teens, and then to the parents once I got to college, but I didn't have any of those issues that a lot of other people still experience today. So I'm just thankful that I didn't have that. And I think when I moved here to Tennessee, that was something that I could offer the individuals here, that they didn't have to be that person. They didn't have to worry about being the point person for this program that was for gay men. No. Let me do that, whether it be a radio station or TV thing. I can be the front person. You all just come to the event. There's not going to be cameras. There's not going to be anything. So I think the level of trust helped because I came in. I'm not from the city. I think we were talking about that before we started. All three of us are like transplants. So we understand that it can be difficult, especially if you grew up here and you have to move through all of these. But as a native New Yorker who is truly from the Bronx, yeah, I just didn't have those experiences, and I'm a little bit more boastful to do some other stuff. So I'm just thankful that I was able to do that, because who knows if I would have been able to do anything close to what Phil went through, so it was just a little bit different, that I didn't have the same issues, and I'm thankful for that, so that we can have that whole spectrum of different voices to still come together, because what brought us all together as individuals are all those lights that we were talking about. So still, regardless what Phil went through, we found each other. Whatever, Abby went through, we found each other on totally different things, but then we've been working together so long. It's been a wonderful experience. So,
Well, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to have this panel. I am hopeful that if someone's on the board or an ally, don't be in the shadows. Step out there. Step out there. If you see an injustice to someone, say, we got you. We're going to take care of you, because society will drop the ball. So people who are strong-willed and advocates, because you never know, even speaking out and saying this from this organization, 125 years in this community, started off as a segregated organization, having this conversation put some weight on an issue that we need to make sure the community discusses and understands. I cannot say thank you enough to this panel. We do have a survey, as Michelle has reminded me, our communications person, to see how we're doing, because we want to continue and have more of these conversations. So I thank you all for being here. Thank you all for participating. It has been a wonderful experience. So thank you so much, and much love to you. Thank you.